When was the last time Kanye saw the kids?
Whenever he'll call for them and ask, it's probably been a couple months, but
How do you handle, because it's all on you in those moments, the disappointment, if any, from the kids? Like, how do you explain those moments to them?
they always knew that he had a big life traveling before and was always on tour and all of that. So it's and that he lives in different countries all the time.
Hold up and stop the scroll, because the internet just dropped another co-parenting grenade, and this one reads like a tragicomedy. Kim Kardashian publicly clarified that she would never keep Kanye from seeing their kids. And now we're watching the world wait for Kanye's reaction like it's the halftime show we didn't ask for but can't look away from. This is not a simple family feud. It's a live broadcast of parenting, power, and PR. Stay tuned, because what happens next will tell us a lot about how celebrity families weaponize narrative, how social platforms amplify pain, and how a father's response to a comment about access to his children can become a headline that reshapes reputations. First, let's get the baseline straight. Kim sat down on the Call Her Daddy podcast and forcefully denied the narrative that she keeps their children from Kanye. She said she wouldn't stop him from seeing the kids, and that the story that she does is a falsehood being circulated in the public record. That clarification isn't just a PR note. It's a public correction to months of online chatter and a direct response to increasingly urgent accusations. The denial landed like a statement of record, a line in the sand that says, "Do not mischaracterize my parenting as a barrier to fatherhood." We should also remember context. Kim has been candid about the final straws in her marriage, moments she called deal breakers that ultimately pushed her toward divorce, including public comments and behavior she found unacceptable. She framed some of that split as necessary to protect her health and her ability to parent. People magazine has also reported on the toxicity she described, noting anecdotes that paint the marriage as volatile, including jaw-dropping claims about public weirdness and the bizarre ways tension played out in their lives. Those portraits complicate a simple narrative of father-denied access versus mother-blocking contact. We're in a gray area where trauma, publicity, and parenting obligations collide. So here is the immediate dramatic beat. Kim's comment about access is correct, but Kanye is one of the most publicly reactive figures on the planet. He has a history of responding loudly to perceived slights, sometimes via social posts, sometimes via music, sometimes with public statements that expand a private spat into a cultural event. The real question is how Ye frames his reaction: as a wounded parent, as a media strategist, or as an actor in a larger narrative about his reputation. We need to parse the motive. On one hand, Kanye's reaction could be visceral, a father's hurt amplified by public humiliation. On the other hand, he's been a master at controlling attention. A tweet here, a theatrical stunt there, a leaked interview that changes the news cycle. Any reaction will be read through the lens of his past patterns: unpredictable, performative, and sometimes self-sabotaging. But let's not let the spectacle erase the stakes. Parenting access isn't a prop for drama. It's a real relationship between a father and his children. When these discussions play out in headlines, the children become collateral in adults' reputational warfare. That ethical problem is central. How do you protect vulnerable kids when their parents' power plays are being monetized by attention economies? Expect the reaction to be choreographed, or at least quickly adapted into choreography. If Kanye responds angrily on social media, PR teams will sprint to reframe it. If he responds quietly, his silence will be parsed as guilt, distance, or strategy. Either way, the media machine benefits. And remember, both players have incentives to control the narrative: Kim to show stability and protect the kids, Kanye to reclaim parental credibility and public sympathy. Let's talk legal and custody framing only as reported. While the headlines sometimes suggest dramatic legal battles, the facts in public sources are often limited to asides and reported claims. We cannot and should not invent court filings or specifics. What we can say is this: The public narrative about access matters because it influences how audiences perceive each parent's fitness, regardless of what legal documents say. And here's a messy truth. Both personalities are brand actors now. Kim has leveraged the post-divorce period into serious business moves and a new public identity, law studies, brand expansions, and a softer public persona that emphasizes motherhood. Kanye, meanwhile, remains a cultural force whose controversies often overshadow his art and parenting. Their reactions are filtered through brand risk calculus. What does this do to my product, my public image, and my contractual relationships? We should also sift the tone. Kim's denial reads as both parental defense and media-savvy damage control. She chose to say publicly and plainly that she supports access. That rhetorical choice is strategic. It undermines an accusation and positions her as a defender of the children, rather than a litigant in public. It's an attempt to win the moral frame on the record. Kanye's past public statements about family matters have varied, from tender and nostalgic to explosive and erratic. Given that truth, one possible reaction is a performative escalation, a public statement accusing Kim of hypocrisy, or a social media ambush that seeks to sway public sentiment. Another reading is a quieter, private outreach followed by music or art that reframes his side of the story for sympathetic ears. Both outcomes are plausible. Both are designed to shape audience perception rather than solely resolve parental logistics. There's also the platform dynamic. X, Instagram, and TikTok do not just report reactions, they manufacture it. Clips get looped, sound bites are remixed, and reaction videos proliferate within hours. A single quote from Kim can become an attack meme. A single Kanye post can trend globally. The platforms amplify conflict spikes and compress nuance until everything reads like a binary. Now let's get into the human angle without losing the critical lens. Kim's insistence that she doesn't block access could be truthful and heartfelt. At the same time, the way she chooses to say it on a high-profile podcast with millions of listeners is a form of message discipline aimed at public opinion. That doesn't invalidate the content of her claim, but it does complicate how we interpret intention. Kanye's identity, meanwhile, is entangled with performance and grievance. His public persona often folds together personal pain and artistic provocation. A reaction from him could be performative, artful, theatrical, and emotionally shouted into the void. Or it could be sincere and tender. Public history suggests we should be ready for both, and to treat any immediate headline with suspicion until we see patterns. Look at the timeline. The divorce was public, the kids have been raised largely in routine under Kim's auspices, and public disputes have flared at specific moments, leaked calls, social media accusations, and public interviews. This latest clarification comes at a time when both figures are very much in the media business, so everything they say is both personal and commercial. What are the incentives for escalation? For Kanye, reclaiming a parental narrative helps humanize him in a moment where controversy has cost him commercial relationships. For Kim, denying the blocking narrative helps protect her reputation as a parent and diffuse a narrative that could paint her as controlling or vindictive. Each side has reputational vulnerabilities to manage. Let's be skeptical. Sometimes stories about denied access are floated as pressure tactics in messy separations. We can't prove the motive, but we can note a pattern. Celebrities and their teams leak or respond to information strategically. Claims and counterclaims often do more for headlines than they do for legal outcomes. Audiences should, ideally, learn to read these stories as media maneuvers as much as familial crises. There's a generational angle too. Social media has created a new ecosystem in which fans feel ownership over celebrity parenting. Commenters demand updates and judge custody by the number of Instagram posts. That hostile environment shapes how both parents behave publicly. They are not just raising children. They are raising children under the microscope of global fandom. We should also be careful about healthy conversation. Kanye has been public about his struggles, and those disclosures have affected how people read his behavior. If his reaction is fueled by genuine emotional turmoil that complicates the media feeding frenzy. But we must avoid pathologizing or diagnosing from headlines. Instead, we should insist on compassionate coverage that centers the kids' well-being over scandal. Now, a tactical reading. If Kanye wants to regain moral ground, he'll need to show consistency, not sporadic grandstanding. Public sympathy is fragile. It rewards reliability. A thoughtful, measured outreach that prioritizes the children's stability could do more for his public image than an explosive public rebuttal. But of course, predictable behavior rarely fuels trending topics, and unpredictability often does, which is why PR teams matter. Expect spins, carefully worded statements, footage of calm family interactions retroactively resurfacing, or legal filings used as signals rather than substantive claims. The choreography will be lightning fast. Within hours, narratives will be set and counter-narratives constructed. The public will be left to pick sides based on feelings more than facts. Look at the paradox. Both parents can be sincere and strategic at once. Humans can care and also manage optics. That duality is uncomfortable for audiences who want clean stories with heroes and villains. Instead, we get complicated people making choices in public, and the media packages those choices into simple, clickable narratives. Let's consider possible immediate outcomes. 1. Kanye erupts online, and the story escalates into a weeks-long tit-for-tat that dominates tabloids. 2. Kanye responds privately, and we get a quiet de-escalation that never makes it into headlines. 3. Both parties coordinate a public-facing truce that reads like a compromise but is really a strategic reset. All are plausible. The ultimate arc depends on incentives. Social reaction will be performative and tribal. You'll see support squads retweeting each side, comedians lampooning the spectacle, and think pieces parsing what this means for privacy and parenting. The conversation will oscillate between genuine concern for the children and schadenfreude about celebrity drama. Both impulses are ugly and familiar. Now, for a sharper cultural critique. The way the media treats parental access in celebrity separations contributes to a public imagination that can normalize invasive curiosity about family life. We treat custody like a storyline and children like characters. That cultural habit erodes the dignity of family life and rewards sensationalism over responsibility. There's also a commercialization element. Every time a parent cries on camera or posts a note about their kids, that vulnerability converts into engagement metrics, which, in turn, become advertiser-friendly currency. It's not just about attention. It's about monetizing intimacy. Both Kim and Kanye operate within that economy, and that complicates moral judgments. We should call out double standards. When a wealthy parent sets boundaries for safety, they're often vilified, whereas in other contexts, similar boundaries would be respected. Conversely, performative displays of access or absence can be rewarded with sympathy. We need more nuanced coverage that recognizes power dynamics and avoids reflexive judgment. This moment could also reshape longer-term reputations. If Kanye responds poorly, he risks further commercial alienation and public condemnation. If he responds well, he could stabilize his image. Similarly, Kim's forthrightness could solidify her parental brand while exposing her to accusations of performative concern. The stakes are real. Reputation influences deals, platforms, and public goodwill. If you're wondering about accountability, here's a thought. Public figures should be held to standards that protect children from exploitation in media narratives. That doesn't mean censoring adult speech, but it does mean journalists and outlets have ethical responsibilities when covering co-parenting disputes. Sensational headlines should yield to sober reporting when children are involved. Now, for a contrarian take, maybe this back and forth ultimately benefits the kids, oddly enough, by forcing both parents to negotiate boundaries publicly and clarify expectations. Shockingly, transparency can sometimes lead to accountability. However, that's a risky bet because public negotiation is also performative and rarely prioritizes children's private needs. We must also be mindful of the legal optics. Public statements can be introduced into courtroom narratives or into public perception that influences juries and judges in different contexts. Even when no filing is imminent, media patterns can have downstream consequences for custody discussions. That fact alone should prompt cautious public commentary from all parties. In practical terms, what to watch for next? Look for a measured Kanye statement, a coordinated post from Kim emphasizing stability, or third-party mediators weighing in. Expect PR teams to curate footage and for social feeds to blow up with clips from past interviews used to argue for one parent's narrative over the other. The content economy will do the rest. Let's be clear about empathy. Beyond the gossip, 4 children are navigating adult conflicts in public. That reality must shape our consumption habits. We can critique the spectacle while also asking media outlets to prioritize dignity. The loudest online voices are not always the most ethical. To be frank, this is the anatomy of modern celebrity conflict. A personal issue migrates to a public platform, gets looped through media economics, and then returns as a reputational currency both parties must manage. Kim's clarification and the inevitable Kanye response are textbook examples of how private parenting becomes public theater. We should watch critically and, when possible, with restraint. Here's the cold-eyed reading. This episode is a lesson in how modern fame distorts family life. The headline about access to children is a moral claim, a PR storyline, and a bargaining chip. Kanye's reaction will be both personal and strategic. If he erupts online, the spectacle escalates and the children risk becoming collateral in an attention war. If he responds quietly, his silence will be parsed and politicized. Either way, both Kim and Kanye operate where private life is public capital convertible into deals and influence. Most moments like this don't change the system. They reroute attention into a new product. So expect spin, performative empathy, and strategic timing. Statements and moves meant to minimize damage and preserve advantage. Audiences have grown suspicious of repeated exit threats and staged reconciliations. The more the pattern repeats, the more credibility erodes. There is institutional fragility here too. If the saga intensifies, partners and platforms will reassess risk, and that can have real financial consequences for those involved. That threat isn't abstract. Advertisers and networks react swiftly when controversies threaten brand safety. Culturally, we must choose between feeding spectacle or demanding restraint. Clicks and shares fund the attention economy. Ethical reporting protects children's privacy. We can criticize spectacle without celebrating personal pain. The smartest short-term move for both parties would be calm, private negotiation, and a brief public note prioritizing the children's stability. The least smart move is public theatrics that make headlines while exposing kids to a storm of opinion. Yes, transparency sometimes forces accountability, but public negotiation is risky and often performative. Still, there is a slender chance this could recalibrate expectations about how the media treats co-parenting disputes. Ultimately, the people in this story will keep moving, making decisions with consequences we can't fully see. Our role is to demand better from outlets and to recognize that kids deserve dignity, not clicks. If we insist on that, the incentives of the machine might shift, slowly, painfully, but possibly for the better. Here's the part no one wants to admit. The machinery that turns private family moments into headline cycles is efficient and ruthless, and it rarely includes children in its ethical calculus. PR teams, talent managers, and opportunistic reporters are all attuned to friction points in celebrity lives because friction sells, and there is a seasoned choreography to extract maximum attention from minimum human goodwill. When a parent says something that can be read as denying access, that soundbite becomes an accelerant, and every outlet with a pulse runs it, which then feeds the frenzy and encourages further oversharing as a supposed remedy. The economics are simple. Engagement metrics spike around conflict, and platforms monetize that spike, funneling money back to creators and publishers who take the bait. But that incentive structure creates a perverse cycle where the collapse of private boundaries is both the cause and the product of media attention. If you watch how these stories evolve, you'll notice a pattern: an initial allegation or clarification, a wave of hot takes, a counterstatement, a sympathetic profile, and then either a reconciliation special or a product push that exploits the emotional arc. It is cynical, and it's effective. Audiences click, advertisers pay, and the story resets until someone introduces a new variable. In the case of Kim and Kanye, that variable is parenthood, a subject that should be treated with exceptional care instead of as content fodder. The question for journalists and viewers alike is whether they will continue to participate in a system that rewards spectacle at the expense of children's privacy, or whether they will insist on standards that limit exposure. Some outlets are starting to ask harder questions about the ethics of covering family disputes. But change is slow because the market rewards sensationalism more reliably than restraint. That market pressure explains why even well-intentioned figures sometimes shape their messaging for maximum public effect rather than maximal private resolution. And to be clear, private resolution can coexist with public accountability, but the default choreography we see is often the opposite. So what would a better practice look like? For reporters, avoid quoting or amplifying language that inflames rather than informs, and prioritize context over clicky headlines. For platforms, consider algorithms that do not disproportionately amplify conflict-laden content involving minors, and experiment with friction that slows the spread of viral outrage. For audiences, resist reflexive sharing of unverified claims and demand journalism that centers welfare over virality. Collective behavior could reshape incentives if enough people change their habits, but that's a tall order in an attention economy built on instantaneous consumption. Meanwhile, parents, especially those in the public eye, face an unenviable calculus: how to protect children's privacy while managing public responsibilities and business partnerships. Some choose to increase privacy and reduce public content. Others attempt to curate glimpses that strengthen their brands while trying to shield their children from harm. Neither approach is foolproof. Both carry trade-offs and require constant negotiation. And because both parents in this situation are high profile, every choice gets interpreted as a broad moral statement about parenting rather than a pragmatic decision in a complex situation. All right, spill your take below. Are Kanye's likely fireworks justified? Is Kim's clarification the end of the story? Or are we witnessing yet another negotiated performance dressed up as a parenting drama? Hit like if you appreciate a no-nonsense take, subscribe for more culture excavation, and drop your wildest theories in the comments so we can roast, analyze, and maybe even learn something about how fame reshapes family. See you in the comments.